Hello, and welcome to the Agile Magician's Bookshelf with me, Marcus Katz, the Agile Magician. Yes, I am an Agile Magician, and we have an Agile Magical book and an Agile Magical deck of tarot cards. And these books on the right here, I thought I'd share some behind-the-scenes sort of work, some sneak peek of what I'm going to work on over the weekend, and also give you some news about what's happening next week. Well, actually for the next 2 weeks on the channel, both for members and for the public as well. So I'd like to welcome Tony to the chat. Tony is an excellent moderator, so a big round of hats for Tony. And welcome to all of the members of the channel. And you'll recognise those by their munificent and multicoloured hat wear, depending on how long you have been a member of the channel. And I'm very appreciative of you being members. It helps keep the channel alive and well, and it supports me buying usually more books, to be honest. So what we're going to do this evening is we're going to just take a quick look at some of the cards in terms of how I've dealt with them in the Magister, which has just been published, and I'll talk a little bit about that, and if anyone's got any questions, I'm happy to answer those. And then I just wanted to give you this sneak peek at something. You'll get a clue from the titles there, but perhaps it might not be too obvious as to why I've got those particular books out to do a video on. And then we can do some tarot readings as well for anyone who's just passing by, or for members. Members do get priority in the queue for doing tarot readings if we're going to do those. I'm going to keep this to just under an hour. I know I said last week we do half an hour, but someone asked a damned interesting question, and we spent the entire hour discussing it, which was very welcome, very appreciated. However, because I'm going to be travelling quite soon, I do need to keep this one to half time probably, so half an hour to 3/4 of an hour. So I hope everyone is having a good start to their weekend. And again, if you've got any questions, just ask in the chat. That's appreciated. So if no one's got any immediate questions, then I'm just going to make a start at just talking about the Magister, talking about how I've dealt with some of the minor arcana in that, and then I'll just do this sneak preview, and then we can take a look at some tarot reading perhaps. So the Magister is now published. It was published, and if you've seen the video that I did to introduce the book on its launch, the book was originally published in this smaller format, like so, and that was published about 10 years ago. However, it was, unfortunately, I was very much let down by the publisher, and it took a good couple of years to get the rights back so that I could publish it myself. Unfortunately, we had a financial issue and a marketing issue and a reliability issue just across the board. Everything that one might want from a publisher, unfortunately, we had an issue with. So I republished it, and then a few years ago we took it off the market because we wanted to just tidy it up a bit, align it a little bit more to our self-study course called the Crucible Club, and also we wanted to add in Charlotte Wild's story, who's going to be co-authoring the other 10 volumes. There are 11 volumes, so we took it as a good opportunity to really share Charlotte's lived story, because that's a lived story of working through the Western Esoteric and History system over her lifetime. So we've included that, and that is different. That's not in the previous edition at all. Also, obviously, wanted to make it a hardback, and this is actually at the limit of what Amazon can publish as a hardback. It's within 20 pages of the maximum size for this largest format of book. So that was entirely coincidental, but very, very well appreciated, the fact that this is the largest book that Amazon can actually print on demand. Unfortunately, there isn't a way to buy a signed copy. I did originally sign book plates for the first edition of it, and I'm not sure how many people actually got that in the end. There weren't that many released. There were a lot published, but not many actually made it out into the market, unfortunately. And in some cases that was after people had bought them, although I never saw any of that money. So this is not a limited run by a long way. This we wanted to get this out, so we used Amazon. So as long as Amazon keep going, then this book will be available. What I could do perhaps is send out some book plates, some signed book plates or something like that. That's a solution to that. You can see the publishing history here, 2014, 2016, 2025. And I think the first introduction that I kept the date in was, where was that? That was somewhere in here. 2012, down at the bottom there. You can see just down at the bottom, 2012. So, and it's excellent for people who've been following our work for quite a while. Hopefully you will have at least 2 previous editions of this, and this completes the set of editions of this particular work. We are currently working on, I have notes over the years for all 11 books. And Charlotte and I went through there is a map of all of the books at the start of this one. Where is that? Just after that section, just before that section. Sometimes forget which sections are in. Here we go. So this section here, called the Order of Revelation, this actually details book 1, which will be, which is this book, which is the Neophyte book, in effect. And then the next book is a Zelator book, or a Malkuth book. And this is the Light of the Labyrinth, the second book. And then the third book is The Rainbow at Midnight, and that is Theoricus and Yesod. So this is more to do with the psychology of the occult, the psychiatric viewpoint, the nature of Jungian and Freudian work, the early work of Dion Fortune, Israel Regardie, and to some extent Crowley, Robert Anton Wilson, and a few other authors who have actually treated the idea of the psychological aspects of the great work. And also on a practical side, this is the third volume, that has all of the astral travel stuff in it, the inner guided meditation, a lot of dream work. That was something I specialized in for many years. So there's a lot of lucid dreaming work, dream interpretation work, and references in that. And also that will then build on the sort of ritualistic and practical format of the second book. And the second book, the next book, in effect, will have a lot of ritual work in. We'll talk about the Dwell on the Threshold. We'll take a full look at the Vision of Zosimos, the Emerald Tablet, the Chemical Wedding, and this will really look at the full map of the Western esoteric history system, the spiritual map from start to finish as it's portrayed in a lot of other narratives, a lot of other mythological stories, a lot of metaphors, a lot of so-called esoteric texts and so forth. I'll perhaps take a quick look in both Volume 2 and Volume 3 at the Kybalion and explain why there's such a pseudo myth about that and why it's not really hermetic. It's more New Thought, it's not even New Age, and it's certainly not what we would say is esoteric, but unfortunately social media have got hold of that, and because it's out of copyright, it's a very easy target to wax lyrical about on social media, and there are lots of reprints of the Kybalion, again, because there's no one to claim authorship or copyright, intellectual property or royalties for it. So unfortunately that then has tied it into a cycle that it sort of floods the zone as far as esoteric work goes. Now, just to answer a previous question about I. Newton, if you're still in the chat, ever spoken or seen a demon or entity? Well, that's something that we will go into in the Magister, but there are lots of examples. I don't know if in the vignettes in this one, where we've included little vignettes of real things that have happened to illustrate some of the points here in a lived experience. I can't recall if I have anything in here, but certainly when I did the Abramelin operation, there were physical appearances, manifestations, experiences of both divine, angelic and demonic entities within that whole working. Similarly, I've had experience with Enochian spirits, a witch and I that I was working with back in the day. We evoked Hecate to visible appearance and had an actual visible appearance of Hecate. So over the years, I have seen, like physically seen, as far as one can say to physically be seeing anything, various entities at different levels of the hierarchies in terms of the esoteric world. And at the end of the day, it's a question that you often get asked is, have you seen something? But it's, again, at the end of the day, it's a lot less relevant a question, interesting a question as the actual experience of that happening, because a lot of entities are far more their presence than they are their appearance. As you would expect, we in our world are full of appearance. Some people can hide their whole presence behind their appearance, and entities don't have that luxury. They're on the inside out of that. In effect, it is a presence that clothes itself in a manifestation, in an appearance, in a sensation, and it is far more powerful, far more spooky, far more dramatic and real, experiencing the presence of an entity far more than its appearance. The appearance is merely a sort of like putting on a jacket or something. Certainly in the Abramelin, the four lords, for example, Lucifer and so forth, their presence was absolute. One weird experience I had was a ghost. When people ask sometimes, if you tell them that you're into tarot, I don't know how many other people have this, perhaps you can say in the chat, but people say, oh, what, like the Ouija boards? And it's been a long time since I ever used a Ouija board or anything like that. But if you say, oh, I do tarot card readings, sometimes it's as if that opens up the gateway to say, oh, so you speak to the dead, or, oh, do you believe in that sort of thing? And that sort of thing also includes UFOs, ESP, and the Bermuda Triangle. So there is a misapprehension to that. But I did see a ghost. When I was about 14 or 15, for several years, I did paper rounds to earn some cash in a small village called Ambergate, and it was snowing, and I was out early. I was on my bike. I had the very heavy paper bag. I had quite a big round at the time, and I was out early, and I was just propping up the bike near to the post office, and I turned around, and I swear this to this day, as clear as day, in the snow. It was quite a bright morning, I recall. It wasn't too dark, although it was obviously winter and early. But a figure in black, a robed figure with a monk's cowl, full-on ghost monk appearance, walked across the road. Within maybe about, 40 foot away, maybe, something like that, 100 metres, maybe, something along those lines, and walked across the road and up onto a road that was on a very steep hill, because Ambergate's in a valley, and I was doing the round at the bottom of the valley on the main road, and disappeared. And I was like, what the hell? I mean, I was so stunned, I didn't move. I just watched this figure walk up, and I ran. I dropped my bag by the bike, and I ran along the road to look up to where the figure had gone. And of course, not only had it disappeared, but there were no footprints. The snow had fallen. I'd not got that way. There were no cars, no other people, no dog walkers, nothing. The snow was perfectly flat, and that was it. And then I had some research a bit later on, and it turned out that there had been a what's it called, like a retreat or something for Christians on that road many years prior, in the early days of the village, and I had not known about that. There was no evidence of that. There was no old church up on that particular road or anything, but I then found that out later while I was doing some research into the woods and looking at old names for the woods on old maps, and on one of those old maps there it was a sort of convent retreat sort of thing on that particular road, and the property was still there, but it was like just a private house, something like that. So yes, so I've seen a ghost, I have seen a UFO, and I've seen many spirits. In terms of what Remy is saying in the chat, mischievous entities that lightly tap your shoulder and head or push you, I have had. This was sort of, we had some big rituals that we used to do for a group, which I mention in here, called the Illuminated Congregation of Melchizedek. And when I first moved up into the Lake District, we had people come up from Derbyshire and people who we'd met locally come to rituals here. And we did all sorts of rituals. In fact, I have just a copy of this book here. This isn't published. This was a privately published thing. We had a photographer friend of ours come and take some photos of a ritual that we did at the Stone Circle, and we did some work at midnight in the temple. So we had sort of temple things going on, and we started off in the morning going up to a high hill, Castle Head, to overlook the lake, and used the trig point as the altar. We did a meditation up there, and we started in the cave as well. It's a beautiful photo there from the cave, where we were scaring the snakes and washing our wounds and things like that. That was a full one-day ritual for a group of people called the Thesmophoria. I can never pronounce it, but that's based on a ancient Greek mystery school ritual. And we were doing one of those, and we had a guy who was very much into Esoteric and runes, and he actually worked with owls for his real job. He was an actual owl keeper at a castle. And so none of the people we were working with were playing around, that's for sure. And we went out and did a Easter ritual, or a spring equinox ritual, and it was really fun. And we painted eggs and we rolled them, and we did all sorts of repurposing of common practices, but we repurposed them back to a sort of Nordic, runic sort of way. And I kid you not, we had this thing where I actually accidentally dropped my my egg before it was time to actually drop it, and I felt like it had been pushed out of my hand. And without thinking about it, I just went down to pick it up, and it started to roll down this hill. And the hill in these woods by the path, I swear hadn't been there a second before. But all of a sudden, I found myself literally, and the egg picked up speed, and I ended up running down through all of this bracken and these sticks, and tripping over and rolling over and chasing the egg down the hill. And I picked it up, and I came back up, and I kid you not, I heard it, I felt it before I actually looked up and saw it, because I looked to see where the noise had come from, or where the laughing had come from, the giggling. And again, it was more of a presence of the giggling, the sense of being watched and being laughed at. And I looked up, and there was this, it was in the woods, there were lots of trees around, and there was this bright light, and it was like a spirit, and it had all these tingly lights coming off it, and it was just laughing, and it was sat on the branch like an owl, sat on this really tall branch, and it wasn't the sunlight, it wasn't my eyes, because it was literally, as I came up the hill, I could feel this thing laughing at me. And yes, that definitely pushed the egg out of my hands to perhaps stop me being taking it too seriously or being pretentious about it. And so there are all sorts of things, and people in the chat are discussing different things, like a guy that would twiddle Bill's hair. In fact, the Bill has tattooed an owl today, so there we go. We have our owl synchronicity for today. The owl is sacred to Athene, so Charlotte, strangely enough, works with owl symbols quite a lot via her work with Athena. And Sherry's saying that seen a white figure in your bedroom, which eventually melted into the wall. And if you want, if you ever get the chance to speak to my co-author Tali Goodwin, about spiritual entities and things that not only she has seen, but when she has worked with them, other people have seen them, and other people have certainly felt the effects of her tapping into that realm. Then, yeah, Tali has some very, very, very powerful and strange stories as well. So I think it's part of this work. It's certainly part of the Zelator work, and I'll come back to the numbering in a second. That's a very good question. But there is a sense of, when we first start on this path, we really want to know that there's something more than we can see, and this is very much the neophyte going into their quest. The difference between a normal person, as we might say, and a neophyte is a neophyte has started the search. They want to know what the world is, whether ghosts, UFOs, the Bermuda Triangle, Ouija boards, spirits, all of these things that are part of rejected knowledge, whether it exists or not. And that's fair enough. I think that's fair enough to start off with. And there are plenty of books. In fact, I'd argue that most of the so-called esoteric books are about getting some sort of practical result. And certainly we see that in tarot. You want to know that your tarot reading is tapping in something to tell you something that can't be found out just by common knowledge. And this is very much part of that neophyte work. But it's also very important not to get stuck with that, not to spend all of your time just basically ramping up the sort of effects that you're trying to experience, because all of that is it's the same level, it's the same hierarchy, it's the same world that you're working in. And I think and this is really where we've tried to set out the difference between each of these things. That the first book is about the sort of theory and general practice. The second book is about the sort of actual practice, rituals, sigils, the map itself, the journey. And then the third book is very much about the psyche and the astral levels. And at this point, we are covering similar things, but also very different things, a very different way of looking at them than just being locked inside an occult book or an occult teaching. And then as we move up, particularly when we get into Practicus and Hod in the fourth book, we learn to begin to think and rationalize and use symbolic logic, use correspondences, all of these sorts of tools, these parts of our brain that are very, very rarely looked at, other than perhaps in the fourth way work, not really in theosophy, not in Rosicrucianism. There used to be a lot of this in the New Thought movement, but again, it was sort of ejected in favour of far more flamboyant showings of magic. And if you've got this book, if you've got the Magister, you'll see that I reference a piece of work by Alan Moore called Fossil Angels, which was his critique of armchair magicians, written over 10, 15 years ago now, but it applies just as much today to the YouTube generation, the TikTok witches and things like that, where unfortunately everything devolves to presentation, to impact, to effect, to sensation and sensationalism. And that is very unfortunate, because this work is entirely the opposite of that. It is entirely the opposite. But that is my soapbox, so I'll get off that for the moment. So to answer the question about the ordering that Apox had very, very wisely asked, originally I released this, and I thought it was being very clever, as Volume 0. And that was because it was neophyte work, and because it was, I thought I was being a bit different and clever. This is the volume 0 that sets the stage for all of the numbered volumes to follow. But unfortunately, then it meant that so many people would ask, is this the first volume? And I'd say, yes, it's the first volume of a series of 11. So how many volumes will there be? Well, there'll be 11. What will be the last volume? Volume 10, and so on. And on Amazon, it's showing us volume 0 of 11. Made no sense at all. And there were other reasons as well, and Charlotte and I had a big discussion about this. In fact, we actually rediscussed it all over again, literally 3 weeks ago, when I was just tidying all of this section up. And this section is a little bit different from any of the previous versions. If you've got the previous versions, it's not worth going through it line by line to see what's different, but we have really tidied this up just a little bit to make sure we have a bit more of a structure, map and syllabus, even though that will get tweaked as we go along through the volumes, because the further up we get, the more abstract it gets and the less notes I have, because of the rarity of the experience and work as we go up the tree of life. But there's still some things I'd like to say about it, that's for sure. So that will get tweaked as we go along. And as part of that discussion, I had the discussion about this being volume 1, and I agreed that it was even confusing me. So yes, this is volume 1. It used to be called volume 0, the Order of Revelation. Now it's volume 1. And we had a discussion as to whether there'd be a Darth volume as well. But that would have meant that there'd be 12 volumes, and that might be even more confusing. So the Darth volume will actually span, as it should do, Kabbalistically, the 2 of the volumes around the abyss as we go up the Tree of Life. But that will make more sense as we go along. So that's the Magister, and I was actually just going to look at the there's a little tarot bit in here. Well, there's several tarot bits in here, but just wanted to point out, if you are new to all of this sort of stuff and you've been interested in buying the Magister, and you actually have to buy the Magister, and you want some way into it, then this bit here, a map of the spiritual mountain in the minors, might be a good way in, because it looks a bit convoluted, but hopefully it shows us really where this is different to other books, because, and certainly books about the tarot, in that I really, in this section, look at the map of 40 gates with the tarot, starting with the 10 of Pentacles. So we have the 10 of Pentacles here. It ends as it began in a garden. As it is said, the light shineth in the darkness, but the darkness comprehendeth it not. There's a secret teaching embedded in this card, as depicted by Wayton Coleman Smith. The young child looking back out at us, putting his hand on the white dog here, is the character who grows up to be the Fool. So embedded in the most material of cards at the bottom of the Tree of Life, and we actually have a physical Tree of Life drawn onto the card, and the archway to show that this is the arch of Malkuth to that comprehends the rest of the Tree of Life, that this is spirit, that this is the rebirth of the spirit in our physicality, in our body. And I don't think anyone had really pointed anything like that out before, but certainly that's something that one could interpret this card as. And then we have the idea of the realization that all of our intellectual attachments and how these pin us to duality and appearance. And then we have the illusion of happiness in attachment, as if making romantic or physical attachments, relationship attachments, is necessarily going to give us contentment. We're going to find it outside. And then the highest expression of energy in the lowest world, we struggle constantly in the world of duality. We're always moving towards some sort of goal, and therefore there is a illusion or a falsity, a trap in the world of matter, Malkuth, the world of 10, in the world of Atzilith, the highest world of spirit, of the ones, in that we're always striving, and this is that trap where we are always striving to find out more, find out more experience, even if it's spiritual experience. This is sort of buying too many occult books and never reading them or working with them, perhaps, that sort of thing. Just as I put it, using the escape map to actually wallpaper your cell just to make it more comfortable, and not actually saying this is an escape out of the cell of illusion into reality, just constantly wallpapering your cell. So this then looks through all of the minor arcana in that sort of manner, in a mapped manner, in a way that accords to the Tree of Life, to the initiation system, and to actual experience of watching students, watching other people talk or work or miswork through Western esotericism, whether that's through Thelema, through Golden Dawn, through witchcraft, through tarot, whatever method it is. Everyone follows the same sort of map. So the invisible third dog, I've read a lot. Well, not read a lot. I've seen some people talk about that, but I don't think there's really an invisible third dog in there, and I say that from having it could be. I mean, it could be, but I think the thing is I tend to work from a very, very high-res version of the very first print of the Pamela A that was... only one person has it. They very kindly did a scan of it, a very high-res scan. And I used those really for a lot of the research that we did on the Waite-Smith deck. And it is possible, I think this is what people sometimes refer to, this thing here. Can you see here, we've got like maybe a tail, and then we've got like a body that could be, and this could be like a little dog's face, or the dog could be like looking up, like to follow these, and its snout might be behind that pentacle there, and then this bit of the body would be there, but it has been patterned in the same way as this has all been patterned. And a load of people try and make out that this is actually a Waite-Smith monogram, and there are various other hidden symbols in here. To be honest, Pamela Coleman Smith wasn't that consistent. But ironically enough, everyone then missed this symbol here, and particularly this symbol here, which, as we now know, is the shield of Winchelsea, and that's from the Research in Secrets of the Waite-Smith Tarot. And that arch actually exists at the real place as well as a lot of examples of this particular flag. So, people were busy seeing things. Isn't there a name for seeing things, that making patterns that aren't there? And it's very dangerous with the Waite-Smith deck, because the PAMA is not available for purchase. I've got a copy of that in the red box that it originally came with. I don't know where it is at the moment, but it's invaluable. There aren't many of those around, and the original PAMA, I think there's only about 3 people that have the actual PAM A, the one that was then recalled. So yeah, I think mine's a PAM B, technically, but one of the first printings of the PAM B. So yeah, so Pamela Common-Smith said that the deck would be coloured probably very badly, and in some cases the colouring and the redrawing of it has actually conflated some of the symbols, hidden some of the symbols, confused some of the symbols. From the very first version of the deck that was just a bit clearer. Because what people don't realise is that this deck here wasn't drawn by Pamela, not this one anyway. This was redrawn by I don't know what they'd be called in the publishing world, but by someone at the publishers from the originals, because the plates were destroyed, and perhaps the originals were destroyed as well, but they were then redrawn. A copyist, that's the word I'm after, a copyist. And so this and this deck, and most versions of the deck, are from the copyist's version. So in a sense, there's a trick pub question, which is who drew this deck, and the answer would technically be the copyist at Ryder Publishing House back in the day, because we've only got about 3 copies of the first actual printing by Pamela Common-Smith, drawn by Pamela Common-Smith. So it is possible that the copyist wasn't sure what this was and then drew, and they shouldn't have done, but no, that can't be the case because the original PAM A does have that pattern on. So Pamela put it there. Now it is possible that there was a dog drawn there and she just drew over it and then they coloured over it to make it part of this. And we have another example of that, the OSL line, as it's called in the deck, which is the oh shit line. And Pamela Common-Smith didn't call it that, that's what it's been called since, which is on the Sun card. And again, once you see it, you can't unsee it. And this also tells you which version of the deck that you're actually looking at, because it was removed from PAM C and D onwards, I think. But you see this wobbly line here? Pamela was obviously drawing straight lines, lightly with the ruler for those, drawing the wobbly lines for these, drawing a straight line, wobbly, oh no, oh dear. Wobbly line shouldn't be there, but it's been left in there. As a couple of people, very, very nerdy tarot collector type people, have made the point that that could have been a crack in the plate, but most of us don't think so. It's just a wobbly line that Pamela drew, and then it's just been left in. So it's possible that that was a dog, and then it's just been drawn over and coloured in because it just didn't fit, or the pentacle had to go there and that covered the dog's head, and then it didn't make sense to have the dog there, or something along those lines. But I don't think that's particularly symbolic. I think that's more an artifact of the production process itself, and I'm far more interested in the actual symbols that are clearly drawn on it and what those symbolise. So that's my take on it. Okay, so anyhow, so that's that. That's the Ten of Pentacles there. That's the Manchester. So let's give you just a sneak peek as to what's coming on the channel. And I don't know if anyone has been watching. Oops, what's happened here? Let me just move that around. Oh, excuse me. Let's go for that. Sorry, there we go. Has anyone been watching Pluribus? on Apple by Vince Gilligan, the guy who did my favourite all-time series, Breaking Bad. Has anyone been watching Pluribus? And without giving too many spoilers, Pluribus is a science fiction, high-level science fiction concept where basically through various means, events, shenanigans, the whole of the human race becomes like a hive mind, as it's referred to in that. It is called, let me just write it down. And it has a 1 in it as well. But basically, it's a high-level science fiction concept, filmed very down to earth, where the whole of humanity becomes a hive mind. Pluribus means many, and the one in the many is the whole nature of the story. So in the series, of which I've just watched the 3rd episode literally just before coming live, the 3rd episode is now airing, streaming on Apple TV, and it has about 12 or 13 people who have not been absorbed into the hive mind. So the whole concept is the entirety of the human race is now a hive mind. They're all connected, apart from just a few people. And one of these people is called Carol, and Carol is the sort of protagonist, and she is trying to deal with the fact that the rest of humanity have now become this hive mind. And it's really, really fascinating, very well done. It's Vince Gilligan. Say he produced the Breaking Bad, which I think was an excellent series. Very well written, very well acted, very well cinematography, production. The whole thing was just really, really well done. And so I'm just going to keep trying to adjust this. It's something very odd with this this camera here at the moment. It's usually not too bad at holding itself in place. There we go. Sorry about that. So yeah, but I'm really interested in it, and the channel is going to do a video on it very, very soon, probably in the next few days, because then I'm traveling for a couple of weeks. And that is because in esotericism, there's already the idea of a global mind. And we can find it in science fiction, we can find it in all sorts of other works, but we can also find it in occultism. And ever since the concept was teased, ever since the series started, and it was obvious what they were doing with it, I wanted to do a video on it. So I've got all of my books on the subject out, and I'm going to do a video on that, hopefully over the weekend, and hopefully my voice is a little bit better as well. So the Nexus, and his book, Mike McQuay's book Memories, is one of my favourite books. Beautiful book about time travelling, body swapping, and a romance in the middle of all of that. But that's an incredible book about identity, time travel, all sorts of other things, the nature of love over time and the nature of memory. But the Nexus is, again, it's about a sort of hive mind that becomes prominent, and it's really interesting. This is more of a sci-fi thriller sort of book. So that's interesting. And that is actually very similar to World Soul. Now, I had to rebuy this recently to do the thing because I can't find my edition of this. It's somewhere around, but this is the exact same edition, although this is ironically from Mount Prospect Public Library. And this is a Russian science fiction novel of this. Can you see the figures down here? And this biomass. I think they call it something like bio something in the book. And again, it's a translation from the Russian. Biotosis. The biotosis it's called. And this is from a Russian point of view, so it's far more dystopian. It's far more of a warning than the sort of Western American-centric sort of science fiction views of it. The Russian science fiction authors have a very, very different view of what a world soul or a hive mind would actually be like, a far more dystopian, negative view of it. And in fact, this book in itself, and most of these books are actually based on, and it was said that 1984 and Brave New World, again, if you've not read those classic books, then 1984, Brave New World, very, very classic science fiction books, chillingly ahead of their time. But it was said that either one or both of those was partly based on another Russian author's earlier book called We, which is about, this is not so much the hive mind, this is more of a dystopian sort of book, but this was written in, so inspired 1984, and I'm just trying to remember when this was written, 1923. So in the very early 1920s, this was written. But the reason that I pulled all of those out and what I want to do the video on is because of Mart Magic. Because Mart Magic is what really reintroduced me into the ideas of the future of humanity as being a sort of hive mind, a global consciousness, a utopian or dystopian future. And we do cover this in the Magister, where we talk about the aeons, like the Aeon of Horus and the Aeon of Mart, as being a individualistic aeon, the one we've entered into now, and a 2,000 year ahead aeon that's already shadowing our time of the sort of Mart aeon, which is far more collective, far more utopian, far more uniform as well. Perhaps one might say an Aquarian utopia and an Aquarian dystopia as well. And so I'm going to cover how Maggie Ingalls, or Sora Nima as she was known as, who I had the pleasure of meeting a couple of times and contributing to some of these works back in the day, how that is seen. And that is all included in Charles Stansfield Jones. Aleister Crowley was aware of the Aeon of Mart, but he didn't say too much about it. And again, all of that is based on a very earlier sort of idea about the aeons or the ages of humanity that Crowley was really into through his upbringing with the Plymouth Brethren, and he brought that into an Egyptian sort of style based on something that was in the Golden Dawn, but it's all based on this idea or worldview called eschatology, the new spiritual human being in the future. And all of these maps and models, particularly this one, of going through the ages. So you might see in that the age of Aries, the age of Pisces, the age of Aquarius. You might see it as the Christians did here, as the age of the nettle, the age of the lily, the age of the rose, or you might see it in occult terms as the Aeon of Osiris, which is like Christianity and sacrificial gods, being replaced by the Aeon of Horus, which is individualism, and then that will eventually be replaced in 2,000 years by the Aeon of Mart, which is universal hive mind, group consciousness, uniformity, a very shared utopian vision, and all of that is in Pluribus. Pluribus is the first time I've really seen visualized, you could say with the Borg in Star Trek maybe, but it's not like this. Pluribus is the very first time I've seen in mainstream streaming TV the whole idea of the Aeon of Mart and the group global brain being contrasted with, is it utopian, is it very dystopian, very controlling, and so forth. There was a nice event in episode 3 that I've just watched, which I won't spoil for anyone, where Carol is really trying to start to explore the limits of what the group mind will do for her, because they want to look after her until they can find out why she hasn't become subsumed into the hive mind. And they are doing that through what they say is just a survival instinct, and also they want the best for her, and they believe that their state is the best state to be in, and so they want to save her from her mere individualism. And so Pluribus is really showcasing this dichotomy, this conflict really between the Horus individual, like every person should become who they are, grow up to be who they are, have agency, have all of the potential realized, become themselves, and so forth, versus the Aeon of Mart, which is far more collective, far more universal, and to some extent far more schmoosy, uniform, and maybe not the Aquarian ideal of utopia when we are all marching and wearing the same uniform. As my astrologer friend Lynn Birkbeck said to me, that he liked Aquarians like me, but quite often he was a bit terrified of the idea of Aquarians to really make everything sort of idealistic, utopian and bright, because that would mean that we would all, as he put it, be marching and wearing exactly the same uniform, and wouldn't that be nice? So so I'm going to be doing that over the next few days. I'll probably release it as, well, it's got to be done by Tuesday, that's for sure, but I'll release that as a free video, but a sort of trailer cut down version of it, but the full video will be available for all members. So I hope that you find that interesting and enjoy that as well. And in the meantime, in the next 2 weeks, I'm traveling. So I'm off to the Tarot Con in Manila in the Philippines, and I'm there for 4 days doing workshops. Then I'm hopping across to the Tarot Museum in Tokyo, and I'm doing 3 workshops, four events in total, 3 full workshops there over 4 days, and then I'm flying back. So what I'm hoping to do is do some recordings there and maybe even do some live streams there as well. If I can get you into the Tarot Con in Manila at a reasonable time, then hopefully I'll be able to share that and live stream that. Again, the time differences are going to be a bit of a killer, but I'll try and keep people updated in the Actual Magicians Bookshelf channel as well. But oh my gosh, oh thank you Tony, that's very much appreciated. I shall buy some of the speakers at TarotCon a small round of drinks from you. Thank you very much. Oh, yes, I will be sending out the PDF on request for the deck. And if anyone hasn't got that deck yet that should have done, I do have those now from Shay. Shay sent me some spare copies from her to me. And also I ordered some more from the Game Crafter, and unfortunately they were very delayed in production, and but they are on their way, and apparently they are in the UK now, so I should have those as well. Not that I now need them, but yeah, I've got no excuse for not sending them out, particularly for the UK ones as well. So thanks a lot, everyone, and yep, I'll try and do some stuff from the museum as well. And again, you can follow what's going on in the Tarot Professionals Facebook group, and also I'll be sharing some cut down versions on the TikTok as well. So thanks a lot, everyone, and take care. Yeah, it'd be nice to do some travel ones. I have resisted doing those in the past because I'm usually too busy answering people's questions who are actually they're present in front of me. But yeah, well, we'll see what we can do this time round. It's going to be quite interesting. So thanks a lot, everyone. Have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful weekend. And thank you if you have picked up a copy of The Magister, then I'll obviously be covering that on the channel as well, and particularly doing some members only videos for that in the very near future. Okay, everyone, take care, have a wonderful weekend, and I shall talk to you pretty soon. Okay, take care. Bye for now.